Hello everyone, this is Schaefer here with UDA Technologies, and we are ready now to dive into some of the most important parts of project communication here with RFI and Submittal Tracking in ConstructionOnline. Of course, as one of the senior product specialists, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of project communication, and I see where some of these cornerstone features apply on a lot of our commercial projects and sometimes on residential projects as well, especially larger ones. And so as we're going through and taking a look at these features today, we're going to be showing you guys some of the best ways to get these things set up, some of the communication that happens maybe in the background or emails that people are going to be receiving, and again, just how to document everything well to make sure that you guys are covered on all of your projects. As always, joining me for our webinar today is Holly Gipson, another of our senior product specialists here at UDA.
Hi everyone. And
we also have Sydney Dorsey helping answer questions that come up as we work through these projects today. So again, all of this work that we're taking a look at today is going to be within the ConstructionOnline platform, and we're going to start today by looking at the overview screen. So when you come to the company overview and you go to the communication section here for the overview, it's going to take you first to your messaging portion where we can see a lot of the different email communication that's been going on through all these different jobs, conversations that are being carried for different projects in different areas. But today, the important area for the communication section is going to be requests for information, submittals, and of course, because they'll apply, but in a much simpler form, transmittals as well. Now, these three areas of communication are going to give you a quick overview for all of our jobs. So when you come to the company overview, you come to the communication tab, click on request for information to see here which RFIs are being taken care of already, which are coming close to their deadlines, or which one are overdue so that we know which ones we have to jump into and kind of speed things up so we don't hit delays. You'll see this here for RFIs. You'll also see a brief summary down below. Within submittals as well, you'll be able to come into and see which submittals are being handled here as well. And with this information coming together, you'll see, again, broad overviews, big strokes. We can go into and see everything that we need to focus on, and then once we're seeing that part, we can then drill down into the specific jobs, like so, to really dive into the content itself. Now, as I mentioned, to begin with, we're going to start with the questions that crop up over jobs. Sometimes these will come from plan reviews or revisions in the beginning. Maybe it'll be the initial conversation that you're having with a subcontractor, but most of this information comes in the form of a question that we then need to document thoroughly. With the RFIs system here, you'll be able to come into and create new requests for information, new RFIs, simply by using the Add RFI button. And when this RFI comes together, we've got a lot of really valuable information that we're going to capture for this. Now, most of this information that we're looking at, it is going to be job specific. Who are we posing the question to is going to be next. In this to field, you're asking a question in most cases, or a series of questions. So who do we want this email to go to, and how do we want to track this information for everything that we're working on? So again, for the to field, we can come in here and just type in who we're working with, where the questions need to go. And if there's multiple people, we can obviously add multiple answerers in here as well. And so assigning this to anybody who might be included is a good idea. Typically what this will look like is, Holly, I think normally as it's presented to us, the question might come from the sub or the tradie. And as they pose the question to a site super or a project manager, the project manager will come in and they'll document everything and they'll send it to the people they expect to get the answers from. Within ConstructionOnline, as you're doing this, you're assigning those out to the people you hope to get the answer from. We're still going to assign it to one of our team members, though. If you watch Holly working through her content or through some of these webinars that we've done in the past, this is almost always me. So I'll just go ahead and put myself in there right now. And so I'm going to be following along with this RFI to make sure that the timing goes well and so that we don't, again, hit any additional delays beyond what we perceive this RFI will cause as this portion. So we're looking at the summit at Smith Square. So what kind of questions might come up in this case? Let's say, for example, in this case, we have a lighting question. The electrician comes in and says, that the can lights that you guys are using for this, or the overhead lights that you guys plan on using, they're probably not going to give you enough light for this area. We might want to send it back to the interior designer, Holly, and have somebody review it, perhaps. So in this case, Sydney is going to be spearheading this. Maybe she's got a lot of experience working with lighting in areas like this. Christian as well, maybe he's the architect, perhaps, and so he has an idea. So in this case, though, we need to put in the subject. This is going to be lighting might be too dim. And so, again, we need to get this taken care of quickly, though, because the electrician is kind of going through and making sure that this is going to be coming in. And for a quick turnaround, we want to make sure that we're setting the due date here early. Now, I don't yet have a cost impact, but I do foresee, because of the deliveries and everything like that, and because my electrician said that it would take a while, maybe about a week in added time to get the new lighting ordered. And as we go through and fill in some of the additional information, you'll also have lighting. Maybe this is going to be main walkway. Discipline, which is a customizable field. Again, this is electrical for me, but we can customize that list if we wanted to be a little bit more specific here. Complexity, I'll say this is highly complex for reasons.
Yeah. Well, and the great thing about using those fields, so, as you guys can see, really the process of creating a new RFI in the system, much like you see elsewhere in ConstructionOnline, is actually pretty easy and straightforward, to create that RFI. It's just as easy as filling out a form. But what adding this additional information, if you're tracking things like discipline or complexity, will allow you to do is then come back and do some sorting. So when you are looking at that RFI log, which we automatically build for you as part of this process, when we create these RFIs, we're not only managing that process of communication, but we're also adding that to your RFI log, kind of automatically building that for you. This is going to allow you to come back and then do some sorting based on, maybe discipline, so that we group all those together, or complexity, things like that, so that we're really able to, again, just do a little bit more with that information. Looks like we have a great question coming in too while we're still on this screen about kind of going back into those two or assigned to fields. In this case, we really want the two to be the person that we're expecting to answer that question. So the two is typically going to be, who we are looking to get that response back from. So if you're needing an answer from your architect, for example, typically that's going to be who you're putting in that to field.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And now, of course, in this case, though, there may be other people that want to follow this, track it, see the responses that we're getting as they're coming in. This is also why we include the CC field. Much like your email has a CC option or a BCC option, this allows other people to follow the conversation without necessarily being a contributor or anything like that. It is very, very useful when we start to work with things like, in this case, the lighting situation. The roofer, or sorry, not the roofer, anybody coming in and hanging like drop ceilings or something like that might be curious as well, because if we decide on a more powerful lighting system, that might change some of what they have planned as well. So they might need to be aware. In this case, I'm not going to include anybody to be CC'd on this one because we have such a quick turnaround time. I don't want to create a big discussion. I just want to make sure that we've considered. And so as we go through and put in the question, if the subcontractor or the tradesperson said the lighting may be too dim, we might want to do some test cases or something like that. This would be the perfect thing to put in as the question or clarification. Harbor Electric suggested testing the lighting. Yeah, and again, the response in this case may be quick and easy, but we still want to document that the question was raised, that we took the steps to verify that everything is going to meet our expectation, and then of course if we have any attachments or additional documentation, you can just add that in here as well. Just simply drag it and drop it from your desktop. It applies directly in here. And if you need a quick preview, you can do this as well before creating and maybe sending those emails for the RFIs so that people can get the immediate notification and respond or reply as such.
Yeah, that's right. So then what happens next, and that's a crucial step there. So when we're creating an RFI, you really have two options. The first one is just to create the RFI and log it. So for those of you that are really wanting a way or a place to log RFIs that you are a part of, but maybe you're really not wanting to facilitate the communication for whatever reason, you just have a need to log that information, you can certainly do that. You can go ahead and do that here. Another example of not sending the email might be in a situation where you're documenting an RFI or a question that's already been answered, but you do want that formal documentation. That's another example, but 99% of the time when you create these RFIs, you do want to go ahead and choose that create and send email option. And so what happens when you do that is that then sets off a chain of events. Of course, the first one is that everyone that you've now named on that RFI is going to receive an email. Depending on your users' permission levels, keep in mind that your client link and team link users can go ahead and see those RFIs and respond to them within their portal. So if you have looped in an architect or a subcontractor, perhaps they're coming into their team link, as long as they're assigned there on that RFI, they would have the ability to go ahead and respond if they were coming into their portal. But one of the things that I really love about the way this RFI process works is that if they're coming in to those portals and doing those things, that's great. But even if they're not, all they actually have to do is just reply back to their email. So everyone's going to get an email when this RFI is created, when you choose that send email option. Your users or the recipients are going to receive that just in their regular email account. Doesn't really matter what they're using. It's going to be the email address associated, of course, with their ConstructionOnline account. So that's going to show up in their Outlook inbox or Gmail or whatever email client they're using. And then all they have to do is just hit the reply button, type up a response from their regular email, and when that reply comes in, we're going to then ConstructionOnline does have the ability at that point is going to grab that response, log it for you here. So you'll see a thread kind of responses start to form in this area. And then you have the ability to then at that point, of course, be notified that someone has responded to the RFI, see the responses, and then based on your satisfaction level with the response you've received, go ahead and decide whether we want to mark that as resolved, which would just mark it as resolved, close it out, or whether we wanted to mark it as unresolved, which allows you to continue asking additional questions and keep that thread going.
This also allows you to eventually start to create some revisions perhaps on these as well, but it also, these options that we have here, the people who are going to be replying to those emails and contributing to this conversation, this thread, those are going to be the people that we flagged in the, or assigned as the to field. So once again, if we open this up and take another look, to is going to be all of the contacts that are going to be contributing to the conversation. They get the emails, they can reply to those emails, they can answer the question, but answering the question by itself does not close this RFI. We're assigning this to somebody because that person is responsible for making sure, first of all, that the question is satisfactorily handled, and second of all, they're going to be the one who eventually marks it as resolved or unresolved. This is the responsible party to make sure that everything is flowing well in this chain of communication. Two will be all the people who are contributing to the conversation. So this is the, again, this is kind of like the proctor. This is the person who's orchestrating this series of questions. The assigned to represents that person. Two would be all the different participants. CC would be the viewing audience, if you will. All the people who might need to follow along with it to see what's happening. So again, as you're working your way through this, all of the information is going to be available here, and you can create new RFIs, and again, depending on your permission settings, those RFIs might be coming in from a number of different contributors as well. Other people on the project, perhaps. I believe we have it open now so that some of the Team Link members have the option to create RFIs, and you can go through and kind of add some additional details and contributions through there as well. Most of the questions, though, will probably be directed in person to like a site lead or a supervisor or something like that. So they'll probably be doing most of the data entry for this, even through the mobile app on a phone or an iPad. So most of that data entry just needs to get captured, and then we have great dashboards for helping keep track of the status. And with the summary screen here on our RFIs as well, this just gives you a quick review and a recap to make sure that everything is either being answered or following along within the time frame that we've outlined for the jobs or for the work that we're doing on these jobs. Now, of course, submittals is going to be similar. So as we step into the submittal creation process, some of the key points that we have access to here as well include, in the submittal screen, we're going to always start with adding a new submittal. And much like before, there are key fields that we need to keep track of in here. Title for the submittal, okay, what choice are we making here? What selections or what items are we going to be bringing onto the project? The spec section in this case is very important because when you get a detailed spec sheet, there's going to be areas in there where we're looking for a specific model commode or something similar. Maybe for the sinks, maybe we're using American Structural for all of the bathroom sinks and toilets and everything. If they, for whatever reason, are backlogged and we can't get those, then we might have to choose a different option. So again, it's really important that we go to the spec section and refer people here as well. This, again, as before, we want to track the discipline. You'll have types for submittals in here as well. Is this going to be a submittal driven by the specification or new product information, or maybe a sample that we've received and we want to kind of follow through with? And then from here, you'll be able to also apply, once again, cost codes, drawing numbers, physical location for what we're going to be working on, and assigning dates in here as well. Dates are probably the most important aspect of this. They're crucial because we need to track when we started receiving the details for this, when we issued the submittal, the final due date for that submittal, because again, in this case, anything that goes past that due date has an adverse impact on the job. And our goal is to never ever let that happen. We have that control, so here we're going to take advantage of it.
That's right. It's important also to note as we're filling out this form, again, just like with RFIs, anything that we want to be able to go back and maybe sort by later, we're going to want to go ahead and fill that out. It's also important to note that with some of the things like your dates, you can go back and adjust those kind of depending on the process that you have in place for your submittals. So for example, that receive date may not be something that you actually have when you initially create the submittal. Maybe we're requesting a material sample from a sub, so you would come back once you actually receive that and update that field. So you do have the ability to adjust this information after the submittal is completed. Now, dates definitely are, of course, like you said, very, very crucial. So as we go through the next couple of steps, as we're creating our submittal here, we would just let's see, kind of have a title maybe that we've given this. We're just gonna for tile. So maybe we need a material sample here. We would be able to fill that form out, and as we get to our next step, in addition to those big picture dates that we're looking at for the submittal, we're also going to be able to now manage the approval process and assign specific due dates to our individual approvers, which gives you even more control and even more visibility in terms of not just who's responsible, but when each of those people really need to have their answers or responses into you.
That's true. And again, as we're working through this, you'll notice that the very first field to fill is going to be choose your submitter. This is important if you're templating out most of the submittals that you're working on, because the submitter is going to be the person who's actually going and finding the option, like in this case, the material options for the first floor tile. They're going to find those and they're going to bring them. And they're going to basically fill out all the blanks for the submittal.
That's
and
right.
They're going to push it back into the approvers, and then the approvers, in this case, will be given dates sequentially, starting with the first contact who has to respond by, let's say, Friday, the second, the following Tuesday, the third, maybe the following Friday, again, as you see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. So in most cases, your submitter, if you choose to use it, and you'll notice that this does say optional, so this isn't always something that you necessarily have to use, but the workflow that I see as most common with clients that I work with, especially those of you that are general contractors, would be that the submitter is typically going to be your vendor or sub. So usually we're going to request the submittal from them. They would be labeled as the submitter in this case, and they'll be able to come into their portal, submit or upload the materials that you need, or of course in some cases those are going to be physical samples. We're usually waiting on them to submit that information first. So this is kind of step one of our approval process. we will go ahead and label our subcontractor here as our submitter, and let's say that we contractually, need to give him 7 days. So first step would be we're going to set his submit by date 7 days from today. Once he has come to his portal and actually submitted or uploaded that information, his step has been marked as complete. That then passes kind of our ball in court, as we'll see on our Submittal Log in a moment, but that kind of passes that ball in court to the next person and really triggers then your approval sequence. Maybe I want to be the first approver. I just want to review what my sub has sent in, so I'm going to give myself a couple of days to do that. Maybe next I want that to go to my architect, so we'll have that go out next, and we've given him an additional 7 days from the time it goes to him that he has to go ahead and approve. You can actually have this sequence kind of build up as much or as little as you need. So in this case, maybe I'll just have 2 additional approvers, but if we wanted to have 5 or 6 listed here, we could. So it definitely supports different approval workflows or processes that you may have. If it doesn't matter what order your approvers go in, if it really, we need 3 people to sign off and you don't really care who does it first, or that's not impacting this particular submittal, you can certainly set up a parallel approval process, which does just that. It allows each of your approvers to approve kind of regardless of whether or not someone else has approved. In most cases, this sequential approval process just gives you a little bit more control, because we're able to say, in this case, my architect, Michael, can't approve until I've done so. So it really puts it in the order that we need to get this moved through our system as quickly and efficiently as possible. And, with the least likelihood for missteps there.
Yeah. And in some cases, the parallel approvers might speed up the process. If it gets to everybody at the same time, maybe we can get all the approvals done at the same time. I do, Holly, much like you said, I tend to prefer the chain of command in this case. I like to make sure that it's controlled in a certain degree, so that it's going from the person who has the most say in whether or not we're moving forward with this. In this case, you, Holly, you get to veto it first. If you don't, then it moves on to the next most likely, and so on down. That way we're not pestering, for example, the owner's rep with every possibility. Maybe we only submit to them the likely candidates that we actually want to move forward with. Again, it just helps. Now, and you'll have both options, by the way, so you can find the way that works best for you. Just as a follow-up, it does look like we have some people here who are already getting those plans in motions for how they're going to use this. Somebody, for example, asks if this could be used from salespeople submitting potential contracts to like a sales manager or an owner. Absolutely. It could be done. You could say, what about this? Does this work, perhaps, or something like that. So if you wanted to set up submittals for those, you could. I've seen people put together plans or designs for electrical work, for like security entry and stuff like that, to see if this meets requirements. So they'll set up all the paperwork so that they can have a final estimate review before they go to contract. It's smart. It's a good way to make sure that you're documenting everything. Even if it's not a traditional submittal, you've still got full documentation and approval for everything.
That's right, and that's a great thing about this is it really is a flexible system. It's going to support different workflows, different use cases. With some of these great questions that we've seen, that's when we think about how we create and name the submittal. Of course, you can be clear as to what type of approval you're seeking there, as well as the attachment. So, in the case of maybe the potential budget or example that you were giving there, Ian, maybe we're just uploading that budget here as an attachment, for that approver to review. So all sorts of things that you can do, that you can go ahead and do here. Additionally, we did have a great question about just some of the information back on this submittal detail page. So before I create this, we'll go ahead and address that. But your received from typically is going to be the person that you receive the submittal from, and in most cases you only are going to have to use this field if you're logging something that you've already received, or you're manually kind of logging more of a physical material setup. So a lot of times with these submittals, the subcontractor or submitter can go onto the portal, upload whatever documentation is needed. In some cases, if they're really physically sending over material samples or things like that, you may want to come back once you've received that and note, who you receive that from, and that could be the vendor or subcontractor as a whole, or it could be that you want to be a little more granular there and note the specific person that you receive that from. So all sorts of ways to kind of use this, and typically you'll come back and document that once you've actually received that.
Now, to add to that as well, this is going to create a best use scenario as you're working through this. If you've already received the information for the submittal, you'll put them in here, and as you get to the submittals and approver stage, you'll skip choosing your submitter because we've already received everything that we need. So in this case, when you're filling out this submittal and you're walking through this process, if you've done the first one, then you can comfortably skip this optional area. If you haven't submitted, or if you haven't received all the information, then you would instead fill out this. Now, again, I mentioned this because one common pitfall that I see with people putting these in, they choose themselves as the submitter, and now the system is waiting for them to do something extra beyond creating the submittal.
Exactly.
And in most cases, you don't need to do that. You creating the submittal means that you'll never put yourself in as the submitter, because maybe in that first area received from, but never in the second.
Exactly, and it's important to note with submittals and the RFIs that we've already covered that, one of the great things about ConstructionOnline is it's an interactive system, so it's very action driven. And when we're looking at this approval process or workflow here for your submittals, anyone who's entered here, we're going to be expecting an action from them. With your RFI, you're expecting a response or an answer. With your submittal, you're expecting an upload or an approval. In all cases, we are expecting additional action to be taken from the people that we're naming here. Now, as we kind of step through the end of this submittal creation process, we've got attachments here that we can upload. So if we wanted to grab anything and kind of just drop it right on in, we can do that very easily. And then as we get to our last step, we're going to have a couple of options for status. Submittals are going to have 3 options for status, and in most cases you're going to only be using the first 2 when you create. So our draft mode status allows us to go ahead and set up those submittals without sending out any communication. I know a lot of you, when you're starting out a job, you already know that there are 150 submittals that are going to need to be completed, and you really want to get a head start on getting that actually set up before you start sending out emails and kind of making everything active. So this draft mode gives you an easy way to do that. You can come in and create everything without communications being sent. Marking the submittal as open, which can be done later or upon creation typically, is going to allow that approval sequence to begin. So basically this releases that submittal out to all of the people that you listed in that approval and submission workflow there. So that'll send it to your submitter and really trigger that sequential approval process, kind of puts it out there. And then closed, of course, is we're not awaiting any further approvals or anything like that. The submittal is, we're logging it and we're going to go ahead and close it. In most cases, what will happen is you'll start with one of these 2, and then we'll only mark it as closed once that approval sequence has been created. We'll go ahead and save this one just in its open status and be ready to begin that process.
And now, Holly, actually, as you mentioned earlier too, when we were creating when we were creating this submittal and we were adding everybody in, all the people who are going to be interacting with this, responding to it, the submitter, all of this information is going to be immediately available to you right here at the top of the submittal itself. So we've got submittal number 10, material sample for first floor tile. You can see that right now we are waiting on a response from Ted Bishop. It's his responsibility to get this done. We can see it here.
Now, Ted will have access to this submittal within his portal. So what will happen is he'll get an email notifying him that we're awaiting for him to submit that information, and that's going to be available to him in his portal here. So he'll have that under his submittal section. The other thing that will happen is that you, as the creator, so as you're going through and creating these, will be able to see a couple of things. First, you'll notice here that you can see I have Ted Bishop here at the top. We're awaiting we're awaiting this, we're awaiting information from him. You'll notice that my approval here, I can see that I will have a response pending. This is grayed out. There's no action available to me at this point. So really, I can't do anything until we've received this information from Ted. Now, he can, of course, go into his portal. The email's going to take him where he needs to go to kind of come in and upload that information. If he happens to just send it over to me, or we're not really using the portal maybe with our subcontractors, then I do have the ability to come in, enter comments. Maybe if he sent me an email, I can copy and paste that information, upload anything that he sent, and I can close out his step on behalf of Ted if I, as the administrator or creator of this submittal, need to do that.
Now, this does, again, open up the possibility here for taking ownership of some of these tools. As we're going through and we're working with areas like submittals, you always want to make sure that you're documenting the responses from the people who were responsible. If it's Ted's job to get us those material samples, and Ted sends us an email telling us when they're going to be available, and he drops off the material samples at the job site or in our office or wherever it might be, then we may go in and close it out on his behalf. But the most important thing that I do in that case is I'm going to take the email response or the emails that we got from Ted, and I'm going to attach those to this before closing it out on his behalf. I want to document and have a paper trail for not only me at the end of this job, but any of the rest of my team who's going to be stepping in and taking a look at this. And Holly, of course, is the owner of the company. She's going to want to go through and see what Ted had to say when we were asking him for all these different things, or make sure that he did it, which is, again, far more important than me just saying, yeah, it's done, let's move forward. In this case, we know what's happening, and we're getting all of the detail together, and everything is moving forward at the right pace. So we're tracking that well to avoid missing these in any situation. And again, the other key part to this as well, for submittals and RFIs both, the unfortunate may happen sometimes where we close out a project and something goes wrong within the warranty period. And when something does go wrong, we want to make sure that we have all the documentation available to protect our company in that event. Maybe it was poor maintenance, maybe it was bad materials, whatever the reason. I want to make sure that we did our job covering this company for everything that we did, which is why we always advocate documenting everything. And if somebody said something, don't play he said, she said. Attach it. Put their responses in there so that anybody can follow up on it even years later. It's critical that you keep all of that documentation together to cover your asses as you guys are working through these projects.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this really gives you a way to do that. A couple of other things to note when we're kind of looking at submittals, you'll notice that I've clicked over here now to my submittal summary or log. Just like with RFIs, as you're creating these submittals, it's going to go ahead and build that submittal log for you, so you always have the ability to come in and see this. With submittals, since we're looking for an approval, and we do have in many cases multiple approvers involved. Note that we can always see here in our in our submittal log, not only which submittals we have open and kind of what the status is. You can quickly see by this little orange basketball icon here who has got the ball in court. In this case, Ted has the ball in his court, so you have that column here to be able to really track who are we waiting on, who's responsible for the next step. Which allows you to really not only have visibility on that, but of course also have visibility on any that might be waiting on you personally, kind of see where that stands, be able to look at the final due date that would have been established in that first step, kind of see what we have going. Now, just like with RFIs, we kind of looked at the RFI process where we receive the response, but that doesn't automatically close the RFI. Same thing here with submittals. So when we're looking at submittals, you'll notice that your workflow here, for open, you actually have a couple of statuses or pieces of information that we display. The first one is, your submittals that are still awaiting responses. This just means, exactly what it sounds like. We have submittals and we're still waiting on people to respond or approve. You'll also be able to see in the system submittals that have all responses already posted. This doesn't automatically close them out. This just drops them in this bucket so that you'll be able to see, again, as the person managing the submittal process, here are some submittals that now are ready for a final review really from me. We've received all the approvals we need. We've got all the responses and the information. You look over that, and then when you're ready, you're able to then update the status here. So rather than saying open, you would just come in, edit that, close the submittal out, and now you have kind of officially put your final stamp of we're done with this. Now that's part of our historical record, which, like you said, really is now available for you to go back and reference, as long as you need to.
Now, again, as we're working through this too, creating it is always going to be the important first step. We always start by creating this and putting the information together. With submittals, it's very easy to go ahead and preload most of the information that we expect to have. You'll be able to come in here and see all of the information and the detail and the depth and everything like that. For situations where one of these options was rejected, we also give you an easy way to resubmit, basically. As Holly kind of looked at a moment ago, if you right-click on any of these submittals, there's an option to duplicate one of these. So if we wanted to take most of the information, have the same approvers and the same submitters and all of that detail in here, you can always right-click and duplicate a submittal so that you can just change out whatever it is that needs to be changed out in favor of some of the new options that we're going to be putting in their place. You'll also have in here some of the options for things like approved as noted and certain other details that might be coming up on a lot of these submittals as well, once we get past the submitters step. And so we may need to go through and add revisions to areas like this so that we can say, like the revise and resubmit is a great example. Maybe the person who's working on the various different toilet units has never had a good experience working with, what did I say it was earlier? American Structural? No, it's American Standard. Maybe they don't like that as a brand for toilets. They want to go with Kohler everything because it just seems a little bit more, just more. If that's what they want and they say revise and resubmit, well, easy enough. It's going to skip the requirement for Michael Stevens to actually respond because now we have to resubmit. So in this case, we can just duplicate it, make whatever changes we need to, and then resubmit, or edit it and resubmit. But we're still tracking all of this exchange of information, all of these decisions that are made. It's documented and tracked well. This also helps on the reporting aspects because later you might find out that there's one person on this job associated with this who just does not like toilets, maybe. or maybe it's tile or whatever it is. Everything just keeps going back to that person, and that person keeps saying, no, that's not it, no, that's not it, no, that's not it. That might then lead to a conversation with that particular member of the team where we just sit down and say, look, you're obviously looking for something specific. We need to have a talk about this because if we continue going at the rate that we're going, the job's going to be behind by a month. We've documented all of this, so we know right now that we're waiting on you for this. But again, we're tracking it well, and we can see where these hang-ups happen and notice patterns, which for me has always been, again, a critical part of working with RFIs and submittals. You might have somebody that just asks a lot of questions, and maybe next time we need to bring in somebody who's a little bit more creative or a little bit more of a free thinker and looking to get the job done instead of, document everything. Well, no, we want them to document it, but you get the idea. We want problem solvers in this case. And so, again, you start to notice this. You start to recognize these patterns. And for the large commercial jobs, especially ones where you guys have hundreds of different subs working on these, it starts to help paint a better picture of the quality of those subs as well. Because we can start to see who's quick to respond, who's keeping up with things, who documents well because we need them to, attaching pictures and everything like that if we want. Again, we handle it well. And the people that also handle it well, we want to bring on board for more jobs.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a lot of information, to keep track of. It does really require an eye for detail, and it requires, a great system to really, keep everything lined up, keep that process moving along, make sure that we're not getting stuck. We don't want to cut corners, but we don't want to, have anything sit and get stuck. Just, for lack of attention, really. And so this always gives you a way to see exactly what needs your attention, exactly what's been done, kind of keep tabs on everything in a way that is easy and a little bit more interactive. A couple of the other things that I'd like to point out, as we're kind of looking at both submittals and RFIs, just a couple of nice tools that you have available to you with all of these features. The first one is that your RFI or submittal log, and this is available for both as we're generating those. You do have the ability to use your menu and also export that to Excel. So if you just kind of need a way to slice up this information a little bit more. I know a lot of you guys are using this in meetings. Of course, we'd always recommend just pulling Construction Online up in the meetings, on your big TV there and kind of sharing that with everyone. But if you do want to give everyone a copy of this log, you can certainly export it out to Excel. As we just saw, both submittals and RFIs also have some really great print options. So if we want to print up a hard copy of our RFI or submittal, you're able to generate those documents right through Construction Online. And then, of course, once you've created that PDF, you can save that hard copy, download it, print it up, whatever you need to do with it here. And then finally, and we had a great question to come in from one of our customers there. I see you kind of submitting some questions to us, so we'll do our best to answer. But one of the great questions that we've received from one of you, or maybe even a couple of you, is, what about linking these RFIs or submittals to plans that you may have stored in the system, which is awesome. We really offer a great way to do that with our Redline plan room. So if we head over to our plan room, what you'll start to see is that as I open up one of my plans, and we'll grab one of these here. But as I open up my plans, one of the things that you'll notice is that in addition to all the markup tools, which we won't go through all of those today, but in addition to our markup tools, we're also going to have really all of our project management tools available in Construction Online are going to be available through the plan room as well. So those submittals and RFIs, really anything that we're creating in Construction Online, we're going to have all of those available to us over here on this panel on the right hand side. You see the little envelope here that's really representing my communication tool. So I can go into my submittals, for example, and now if I want to link this submittal to a place on my plan, I can essentially just, again, grab it, drag and drop, put that on the plan, kind of where that's going to be referenced or related to, or if it's, kind of related to the whole plan, then you can just tag it in the corner. And what this does is it does create that relationship so that when the submittal goes out, it now is tagged to this plan. And when you go back and look at that or use it, as we go back to Construction Online here, if we go back to our communication tab and look at our list of submittals, you'll now notice that this one that I've just tagged to the plan has this new icon. So this is just indicating to me or my sub or architect or whoever's logged in and looking at this submittal that it's actually related to a plan. They're able to just click on that, takes them right to the plan in the submittal, so you can really create that great kind of visual map and reference between your plans and drawings and things like your submittals and RFIs and Construction Online.
And again, what this is going to allow you to do when you're working with your team is you're communicating a lot of additional information just by attaching it to the plans. Instead of going through and trying to type out all the location details or everywhere that we plan on applying this specific submittal or whatever it is that we're going to be choosing, where the questions come up for your RFIs, pinning those things allows your team to not only quickly reference back to that sheet, the set of plans, but you also see all of these attachments on Redline Plan Room through the mobile apps or through the iPads or anything like that. So if you've got a site supervisor or project manager who's doing a walk on the job site, they can see where a lot of these questions have cropped up, and they can start to get a better, bigger picture for everything that's happening on this. And of course, like with most areas here in Construction Online too, when it does come to time to do all of your reporting and everything like that, you do have the options to print up those submittals and the RFIs easily. As always, you'll also find a lot of the communication reports included here as well. There's always the report section, so you can come here and print off those submittals and RFIs as well. And with the transmittals, again, just to briefly touch on these as well, they're once again relatively easy to create and generate, but this for us has always generated that form that works as kind of a replacement to the old fax cover sheet that details out everything that you want noted whenever you yourself are responding or replying or submitting in this case. So we give you plenty of options to go through and not only document whatever needs to be documented, but this provides that additional level of professional response for anything that you guys may be working with. So you can document all of your transmittals here in much the same way. The beauty of the transmittals, though, is they don't require as many hands. So you don't have to track as many responses or anything like that. They're very one and done in this case. Now again, just kind of briefly going through these questions before we step on to any of the last handful of pieces that we have for you guys today. Going back to RFIs specifically, just to clarify, when you're working within RFIs, the to field is reserved for everybody who's going to be answering questions. Assigned to is going to be for the person who's collecting all of those responses and closing out the RFI when they're satisfied with the responses that they've had. CC will be all the people who are following along with the correspondence, not contributing necessarily, but they just need to see it. And then, and again, as you're working through this, most of that information can be handled either via email or directly through the portal, which of course is the preferred method. Submittals, you'll have the person generating the submittal. That's going to be received from, typically. If you're sending it to somebody because they need to document everything, they're going to be the submitter, and you put them in on page 2 on the creation process. And then everybody who's going to be having a say in that, any of your approvers, will be set up either sequentially, where you choose the order that they can approve, or parallel. Everybody can just say yay or nay all at the same time. We're just trying to expedite this submittal to get it done sooner. Now you'll also have areas in there as well where you can add other people as viewers, again. But the most important part for your submittals is making sure that you've got all the submitters, or the people that documenting the people that you've received this information from, and then all the approvers, and they need to pay attention to both their emails or log in to see these things coming through from time to time. You'll get notifications for all the responses, and the emails are going to be going out well for them and regularly. This overview screen, again with the small orange basketball, shows possession. Who are we waiting on, and how can we speed this up? All of this is about making sure that we get these things done faster, because the last thing in the world that we want to do is just have questions lingering out there, holding up all of our projects because somebody knows that they're supposed to respond, they just can't remember what the question was or anything like that. So tracking this responsible party on the submittal screen especially is critical for making sure that it gets done. Or crucial, I think, is the word that we're supposed to be using.
Crucial and critical, I think. So I think with that, we know we've tried to get to some of your questions as we've gone through RFIs and submittals today. We're going to take just a moment to review those and just make sure that there aren't any outstanding. While we're doing that, if you have some last questions for us before we close out, please feel free to go ahead and chat those over. We love to see those questions. We love to see those questions come in. Ian, I see one already that I think is a great question. Great question that I'd love to address as you guys are sending some additional ones over. We had a question a bit earlier in the session just about the differences between submittals and RFIs in ConstructionOnline, which is what we've been working in today, versus those that you will find in ConstructionSuite, our desktop software product. So we do offer RFI and submittal creation and logging in both of those platforms. I think the biggest difference really is, of course, ConstructionSuite is going to be that on-premise traditional software that you're able to download and install locally. And so as such, that gives you, distinct advantages to doing things that way. When you look at ConstructionOnline being a web-based project management platform, you're going to have distinct advantages of using that as well. And kind of what we've seen is that while both platforms will allow you to create submittals and RFIs, will allow you to log and track those internally, ConstructionOnline does give you the additional capability of being able to have those be interactive with the people that you're sending them to. So both platforms do offer a really great system for creating an RFI, sending it out, tracking, being able to note yourself internally, have I received a response? Is this ready to close? With Construction Online, that's going to be just a little bit more interactive. So that's where we're doing things like capturing responses and approvals, having those available live in a portal. Just a little bit more interactive after the creation phase is what you're going to see in Construction Online there.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the key aspects to this as well. ConstructionSuite is a desktop software. It's an enterprise level management system, but it is all for work in office. If you like to have the responsible parties contributing to the work closing, Online tends to provide some great solutions there. We do have a couple of the desktop communication tools offer a few additional options there for creating like custom correspondence types. But with the big three here in RFI, submittals, and transmittals, we've rarely seen the need. So if you have both, which a lot of our clients do, we normally recommend handling correspondence online so that people can just reply to the emails and it feeds directly into the system. And it works well. Now I'm just kind of going through one last pass on these questions as well. Just to see or verify that we've got responses handled for most of these. We've got questions here again, RFIs to and assigned to, what's the difference? Submittal process, I think we've responded here. And of course we'll go through this after the webinar is closed as well to make sure that we've handled all these questions. But we do have a couple more that just came through, which seems to actually be two different people asking the same question. The question is, basically, do ConstructionSuite and Construction Online sync the information available to you guys here? And the answer to that one is no. Much like the lead system in between the two, the lead pipelines, with ConstructionSuite and Construction Online, we recommend just using one. And that way you have all the documentation happening, preferably on Construction Online, since people are contributing directly to the RFI system and the submittal system. They have access, they can get in and see it, and you don't have to pull reports and send them. And since the two systems are slightly different in how they manage and track responsible parties for them, we highly recommend that you just work within one and try not to update both. They both serve the same function in this case. Rather than trying to use two tools for one job, just use the one that benefits you most.
Yeah, just choose one, exactly.
Now with that, it does look like that actually covers most of the questions that we have. But as always, if you guys have any follow-up questions or anything else comes up as you guys are going through any of these details, you can always reach out to us at info@uda1.com, or you can call us at 1-800-700-8321. Of course, myself and Holly are happy to hear from you, Sydney, as well. We're happy to have any questions or calls coming through and help in any way that we can. We also provide a link to view the recorded sessions. Once again, if you go back to ConstructionOnline.com and go to the events page, or go to UDA Technologies and go to the events page, you'll actually see all of the current webinars that we have upcoming and links for the recordings for any of the previous ones that we have. I'm going to take you guys back there real quick just so that we can review. See, here we've got the upcoming webinars, like next Wednesday, for example, we're going to be covering, again, there it is, CYA with Construction Online, protect yourself with accurate documentation, where we're going to actually talk about some of the signature options and things like that for change orders and other forms and reports that you can create. Next Lunch and Learn is going to be the week after that, where we're taking a look at organizing your projects for success within ConstructionSuite. I think this is actually going to be the first Lunch and Learn that covers the desktop software specifically.
It is, that's right. We've spent our first kind of group of Lunch and Learns really focusing on Construction Online, how you guys can best use those tools. We'll transition over for our next few sessions into looking at ConstructionSuite and hosting some workshops on really how to get your project set up and organized using ConstructionSuite, how to work with ConstructionSuite estimating, in particular some of the reports that we offer on that platform. So those are some great sessions coming up over the next few weeks there.
Sounds good. And don't forget to, down near the bottom, this is where we have on-demand recordings for any of these webinars. So, for example, this that we're providing today, this will probably be available tomorrow. either tomorrow or Friday. So you can always come back in and take a look. You can go back through and rewatch these or any of the other great webinars that we've had in the past. And for any additional questions, there's also this handy little chat bubble here. So you could actually pop in and start having a conversation live with one of our many product specialists here as well, who can provide additional insights or videos or recordings or help guidance, whatever you might need.
Whatever you need, exactly.
Now, with that, I believe that is going to bring our webinar today to a close. Of course, we'll be reaching out to all of you with a link for the recording today, and if you guys have any additional questions, by all means, reach out to us then. Otherwise, hopefully we'll have a chance to talk to you guys again this time next week as we're diving into our next in a series of webinars. But until then, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your attendance, and we hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.